Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. The campaign success of the Democratic Progressive Party of Taiwan has added to the political uncertainty of the very fragile cross-strait relations between the mainland and Taiwan, which is regarded as a renegade province. Can Madam Tsai Ing-wen, the new Taiwan, eventually accept the One China principle? And what would be the consequences arising from the political intransigence of the Taiwanese authorities to sustain the close economic ties across the Taiwan Strait? And how do the younger generation of Taiwan look at the future of this relationship? Today, I'm very happy to be joined here by Professor Huang Jing, Director of the Center of Asia and Globalization with the National University of Singapore.
Make major investments in China.
Why we are living for?
That's a fundamental government
Position on China's
by leaders.
I think that's for nationals. We take have a dialogue, political change, and human rights.
Don't you think
Dialogue. Ideas matter.
Welcome to Dialogue, Professor Huang.
Thank you.
A lot of dynamics could be felt and seen in the cross-strait relations since and after the inauguration of Madam Tsai Ing-wen in Taiwan, the newly elected leader there. What do you think of the essence of her speech? She refuses to acknowledge the 1992 consensus about One China, and that has seriously upset the mainland authorities.
I think, to be frank, I think she does recognize 1992 consensus in a kind of compromising way. I think her speech is a compromise because Tsai Ing-wen was sandwiched between a hard place and a stone wall. And on the one hand, her supporting base as a DPP is a pro-independence because TPP's party constitution declares that independence is one of the is a fundamental goal, political goal. But on the other hand, the situation across Taiwan Strait is such that Tsai Ing-wen would have to say something in her own words to maintain status quo, which means the status quo, of course, has different definitions. By definition, accepted by mainland China and Taiwan under the leadership of Ma Ying-jeou is a 1992 consensus, which means both sides of Taiwan Strait recognize it's only one China. So Tsai Ing-wen have to respect and recognize this fact. Otherwise, her leadership could be undermined in a fundamental way. And given that today's mainland China is a very powerful global power. So therefore, in her speech, she said that she recognized the historical fact that in 1992, both sides had conferences, and at this conference, a series of consensus has been achieved and has become the foundation of cross-strait relations. So she said she recognizes historical facts without saying that she recognized 1992 consensus.
The ambiguity, maybe a very useful ambiguity for the Taiwanese side, has caused some troubles if you look at the two trial balloons the mainland issued. For example, our restoration of diplomatic relations with Gambia, one of the poorest countries in Africa, and the other is eventually Taiwan agreed to attend the WHA session with the permission of mainland, of course. But it's awkward and embarrassing for Taiwan to be called Chinese Taipei.
Yes.
What do you think of these two trial balloons in terms of political groundwork for the two sides to continue to work in a constructive way, the way we supported each other with the KMT government under the leadership of Ma Ying-jeou?
These two events or two incidents do expose Tsai Ing-wen's dilemma. Actually, in her own speech, she also showed that she still keeps the door or option for independence open because Tsai Ing-wen, I believe, if herself, in her ideology, in what she really believes, she still wants independence because in her own speech, inaugural speech, she said that one of the foundation of cross-strait relations is 23 million people's choice and democracy. It's very soft independent. She also said at the end of her speech. She said, let's base on Taiwan and let's be a very good, constructive Taiwanese. And that is obvious. Taiwanese independent tendency is there. So these two events or two incidents, two test balloons, did let people know that she still has a huge tendency towards independence. I think the bottom line is this. I believe as a person, Madame Tsai Ing-wen is very much for the independence. But then the question is that why she made such a compromise. I think it's because the fundamental situation, the overall situation, the so-called big situation has changed fundamentally. We all remember that in 2008, when Ma Ying-jeou became the Taiwanese leaders, at that time, no Taiwanese political leaders dare to talk about reunification. It's like a high wire. Whoever touch it is a suicidal. But in last year, in the campaign, even Tsai Ing-wen herself would not dare to talk about independence. Now independence has become a taboo, become a suicidal wildfire. No Taiwanese leaders dare to touch. So this is a fundamental change from reunification is a political taboo to now the independence is a political taboo. This tells you fundamentally how much has changed in the cross-strait relations. Another fundamental change is that about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, United States plays a dominant role, if not decisive role, in the cross-strait relations. As President George Bush said, the status quo is defined by us, means by the United States. United States defines status quo, and mainland China and Taiwan has to cope with it. But now the status quo is defined by mainland China, by the Chinese government, like the 1992 consensus. The United States has become a kind of factor that's no longer dominant, but supplementary. That's why Tsai Ing-wen is facing pressure, not only from mainland China, but also from Washington, D.C. Privately and publicly, United States Obama administration has made it very clear that they do not want Taiwan Strait to be again undermined, the situation in the Taiwan Strait be undermined by instability and so on and so forth. So that's for Tsai Ing-wen has to make this compromise. The point I'm trying to make is that Tsai Ing-wen's inaugural speech is not because Tsai Ing-wen has given up her preference of independence. It's because the situation forced her to take such a position which is unimaginable just 4 years ago.
Right. Authorities in Taiwan have been held hostage by the latest development in the situation across the Taiwan Strait, with the scenario quite in favor of mainland these years. Having said this, back in 1979, during the Carter administration, a relationship was normalized between the U.S. government and the PRC. Very quickly, the U.S. Congress passed the Taiwan Relations Act, which means the United States will definitely come to the defense of Taiwan if it were to come under attack from the mainland.
Under attack, yes.
Right, but these years we see a decline of arms sales, and Taiwan no longer remains the most thorny issue in the U.S.-China relationship. What do you think of the latest move by Tsai Ing-wen to be taken on board a warship to inspect the Taiwan self-defense capability?
I think that
she said clearly we obviously need to rely on ourselves for military build-up.
Yeah, I think that there's several meanings in that. But before I answer your question, I have to say that the Taiwan Relation Act never says that the United States will come to Taiwan's defense if Taiwan is under attack. It says this, it says the United States would assist Taiwan to defend itself. So, but how to assist, by what means to assist, and to what extent this assistance.
Under what circumstances?
It would be strategic ambiguity. So it's assist Taiwan to defend itself. This is very important because that gives enough flexibility for United States in terms of, Taiwan do need this assistance. But having said about your question, I think first, of course, Tsai Ing-wen as a leader of Taiwan want to send a message to Taiwanese people and to the outside world that Taiwan has this capability to defend itself. Because a lot of people in the United States say, look, we love to assist you to defend yourself, but first and foremost, you should be able to defend yourself in the first place. So this is a message that, look, we are serious to defend ourselves. And second, of course, we know that as the leader of Taiwan, she's also assumed a position of commander-in-chief. She want to go there to show her leadership. Say, I'm the commander-in-chief. You should, obey me, because we know that Taiwan military for a long time has been military forces controlled by KMT, and has been KMT's party or KMT's army. Now, Tsai want to show that now I'm the one who is in charge of this. Last but not the least, of course, he want to show to her own people, her voters, those pro-independent Taiwanese voters, say, look, we do now have military forces that can fight for us. But having said all of that, I think this is more symbolic rather than substantial, because we all know that the Taiwanese military would be really reluctant, if not refused, to fight mainland China if Taiwan goes for independence.
Well said. We have many options on the table, or tools in the box, facing the pro-secession DPP taking office after the campaign there. What do you think would be the most likely response the Taiwanese Affairs Office of the State Council on the mainland side?
I think if mainland China's authorities' response to Tsai Ing-wen depends on how they view the situation, how the situation goes in their analysis. First, we know they're not very happy, and Tsai Ing-wen's inaugural speech did not really see that she recognized the 1992 consensus, and this means that sense no good. The second is that there's no strategic trust between the mainland and Taiwan under Tsai Ing-wen's leadership, because we do know that Tsai Ing-wen played a substantial or even essential role in the theory, in the working out the theory of two special state-to-state relationships under Li Denghui's leadership. So mainland China does not trust Tsai Ing-wen. And last but not the least, after Tsai Ing-wen became the leader of Taiwan, she has adopted a series of policies to promote what's so-called soft independence. For example, she abandoned the lawsuit against the Sunflower Students Movement. She named the Minister of Education, which stopped Ma Ying-jeou's adjustment of teaching materials, which tried to reinforce the China factor in the historical teachers, and so on and so forth. All of things that, while she tried to have a so-called, maintain so-called status quo with mainland China in the cross-strait relations, she has softly nudged Taiwan into the other direction. So I think that's a view of mainland China's leadership. Given this view, I would be very surprised if mainland China government would still adopt the so-called a friendly relationship with Taiwan, because so they're going to take some tough policies.
Exactly. Then we are afraid that Tsai Ing-wen is likely to be put on the grill, to put the to increase our pressure. And then there are two possible options that Tsai Ing-wen faces under the huge pressure from the mainland. She's likely to go back to the deep green side, to give a bear hug to the pro-secession fundamentalists, with Li Denghui being one of them. The other is that he would go to the central line. He would toe the central wire and say, hey, let's talk about extension of ECFA. Let's talk about closer trade and economic links. But then in doing that, he's going to run a lot of risks, for example, by angering the younger generation who were involved in the sunflower protest last year. What do you think of the consequences in both scenarios?
Yeah, and we're talking about how Tsai Ing-wen should handle her problem. But from mainland China's point of view, that's her problem. Why should mainland China worry about how she handles her situation? Because both options are not workable for Tsai Ing-wen. Because if she wins the deep green camp, really go for independence, I think for her the option is a dead end. But even if you go to the middle, the mainland China would not accept it, because the middle is not good enough. Mainland China does not trust her, and mainland China want not to the middle, but right to the 1992 consensus. So for Tsai Ing-wen, I think the only way for her to maintain this kind of, not her leadership, maintain Taiwan to be in a good direction, we'll have to go back to Ma Ying-jeou's line, which to her may be political suicidal, because her own voters may kick her out. But hey, that's her problem. In policy making, there is always saying that, I don't have to solve your problem. Americans are famous lines that it is my dollar, it's your problem. And mainland China can also, it is my status quo, it's your problem. But having said that, I think that mainland China may be to the point, that's my guess, that in the past 20 years, mainland China's policy is always to let Taiwan people know how much they can benefit if they keep a good relationship with China. And maybe mainland Chinese leaders will think, now this is the time to let you know how much price you have to pay if you want to go away from us. And so the Tsai Ing-wen has to figure out, is this price she can afford to pay? If she thinks that she cannot pay for this price, then she will have to make a choice. This choice may be very difficult. It's a hard choice. But hey, like I remember in 2006 when Hillary Clinton was interviewed, Barbara asked her a question. That is, what's the lesson you learned after 6 years in the White House? No, 1996 and 2000. And Hillary's answer, I still remember. She said, the lesson I learned is that you don't have to make a choice when it is only after it is absolutely necessary. Now it's time, maybe. This time may be close, or maybe it's time, or maybe close to the time. Madame Tsai Ing-wen really have to make a hard choice. It's not because she likes, but because she has to.
I wonder if she's clearly aware of the catch-22 situation, but you are watching Dialogue with Professor Huang Jin, Director of Center of Asian Globalization with the National. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
Then what do you think of the lifespan of Tsai Ing-wen's political career? Because fundamentally it's the bread and butter, is the issue of employment, is sustainable investment and trade across the Taiwan Strait that would matter by the end of the day. It's not the independence of Taiwan, because that's a very unpopular idea for a majority, not only across the Taiwan Strait, but even for the American policymakers.
I think, yeah, Tsai Ing-wen came to power by taking full advantage of Taiwan's three problems. How long Tsai Ing-wen's political life or leadership would be, I think it depends on three issues. First, of course, international isolation. And second is how to sustain or promote Taiwan's economy. And third is how to enhance the young people of Taiwan, so the living standard, make sure they have a hope in the future. And without improved relationship with mainland China, without maintaining a stability, cross-strait relations based on 1992 consensus, I don't think Tsai Ing-wen can solve any of those three issues. It will become only worse. And if she cannot solve all those fundamental issues, I think Taiwanese people will then go against him. Actually, his honeymoon is already over. What
do you think of the chance for KMT to make a serious comeback 4 years from now or 8 years from now?
Frankly, I'm very frustrated with KMT. Frustrated not because of Ma Ying-jeou's leadership did not work well. It's not because KMT is so, falling apart in the campaign, but frustrated in the past 20 years, KMT was never able to bring up a young generation the leader. KMT's politics is out of date, leadership is out of date, and the entire way that they operate is out of date. So unless KMT can rejuvenate itself to really bring up a whole generation of new leaders, they have no hope. I would say that 4 years from now, 8 years now, is not depend on how strong KMT can become, but how realistic the Taiwanese public, the voters, can become to realize it doesn't matter if it's KMT or DPP, but it does matter is that what the relationship with mainland China would be. In other words, DPP or KMT, if they cannot maintain the stability in the cross-strait relations, Taiwan has no future, just like that. But if they can maintain stability in the cross, and Taiwan does have a future. But of course, a necessary condition for Taiwan's future is that they will have to go along with mainland China. Like it or not, that's reality. Again, the situation is more important than people's will. 形势比人强, like Chinese say.
Forgive me for using this wording. What's your obituary for Ma Ying-jeou's political career?
I have to say that I know him as a person. I has to be objective on this. I think, people always this. When you have something, just like said, you can say my leadership is like oxygen. When you don't have it, you're choked. I think that is if Taiwan people should think this way. If they don't have Ma Ying-jeou's leadership, but have Chen Shui-bian or Tsai Ing-wen in the past 80 years, what kind of life they would be? I think
particularly in the wake of the financial meltdown.
Yes, because if you look around, the only bright light that keeps the economy going, not in China, in the region, but in the whole world, is mainland China. You look at Japan, you look at South Korea, you look at even Singapore, you look around. The two places economy are going. Number one is China, number two is a developing country. And Taiwan belongs to neither. So this is a good relationship with mainland China, has enabled Taiwan's economy to be growing, not very slow, only 1%, but still growing, not to go backward. Japan's economy going backward. That's how I understand Ma Ying-jeou's words, that I would be missed, because the life after Ma Ying-jeou for Taiwanese people will be worse under Tsai Ing-wen's leadership. That's why Ma Ying-jeou could be missed from that perspective.
Very articulate, Professor Huang. To figure out the future of Taiwan's economy, Tsai Ing-wen says Taiwan got to pin its hopes on three major economic blocks or economic entities. One is the United States, the other Japan, and the third, ASEAN. Therefore, she came up with the idea of a going south, 南向战略, right?
Japan is hopeless. Japan has a negative interest. Japan is struggling. And more importantly, Japan's economy and Taiwan's economy are not complementary to each other. They're potential competitors. And United States are also in trouble. And moreover, I do not believe any political leaders in the United States would develop a kind of relationship with Taiwan at the expenses of its relationship with mainland China. Because mainland China, strategically, no matter how you look at it, is much, much more heavier than Taiwan. So go to United States is wishful thinking. No, go to Southeast Asia. Yes, ASEAN. But please keep in mind, ASEAN is the first region that signed a free trade agreement with mainland China right after 1998. That is well remembered and well in the practice.
That's what you call the 10 plus 1
and then from
FTA
that 10
framework.
plus 2, 10 plus 3. So that is a fundamental architecture for the regional economic development. Can you imagine that ASEAN again will sacrifice? It's a very good, very, very profitable relationship with mainland China. For
But
the
what
sake of
about the
Taiwanese?
TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which
I think TPP
promises to include Taiwan?
TPP is great, but I don't think it will say its day, because both presidential candidates in the United States, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, both of them put on record in public they're against TPP, and the U.S. Congress is not supportive at all. I would be very happy, to say TPP will be passed by Congress, but I hope that's not wishful thinking. But from today's perspective, it's not that hopeful. And even if with TPP, can you imagine that TPP will admit Taiwan first without mainland China's agreement, and second, I would think that TPP will accept China way before accept Taiwan. So, like we discussed, there are many doors open for Taiwan, but the problem is that all those opening doors, Taiwan have to go through the Chinese door. So if the Chinese door is closed, all doors closed to Taiwan. That's a reality. I hope Madam Tsai Ing-wen can really realize that, and the Taiwanese people can realize that.
How would the mainland appeal to the mind and heart of the younger generation in Taiwan? After all, it's these young people that represent the future of the island and perhaps a part of the collective future across the Taiwan Strait.
I think that first and foremost is that we know that one of the good things about democracy is that democracy also, so-called democracy, protect the minority. But on the other hand, the other side of the coin, that sometimes minority can hijack majority in terms of national interest. And this Occupy Central is a vivid example that a group of young people can hijack entire Hong Kong. And the same thing for sunflowers. And now I think TPP got its own dose of the same medicine. I think that to make people understand the real situation, you basically have two ways. Number one, to let them benefit from what's going on. But sometimes more importantly, to let them suffer by what's going on. We learn our lesson through our mistake. We learn our lessons through suffering, not from enjoyment. So in that regard, I think that mainland China can be so prosperous nowadays because mainland China learned a big lesson through Cultural Revolution, through those hardships in those years. I think sometimes, you don't understand who you are, you don't understand what kind of situation you get involved. because you have enjoyed your life too much. I don't mean that Taiwanese people deserve to suffer, but I do mean those people who believe that they can do better by poking their fingers into the eyes of mainland Chinese people. I think those people need to learn maybe a realistic lesson in this regard.
DPP has taken office, and they will definitely refuse to rewrite the curriculum. That Chen Shui-bian did a lot to de-Sinify, I mean, 去中国化, I mean, to get rid of the Chinese factor. So, do you have a growing sense of alienation?
I would say that things actually are more complicated. I think for any nation state, any people, the two sets of identity. One is what we call the cultural identity. I speak the language. I live the way this culture, the civilization tells me. It's called cultural identity. Like we are Chinese. No matter you are taking an American passport, you're taking a Japanese passport, as long as you live the way the Chinese live in, you speak the language, you are Chinese. This is a cultural identity. Another identity we call the political identity. This is a new product of the nation-state building. That is, you identify with the political system of your society. That is, for example, I'm a Chinese, and you can say I'm also a Chinese citizen. But in Taiwan, that's a problem. Culturally, they're still Chinese. They speak Chinese language. They use chopsticks. They said, even though I'm a Taiwanese, they say that in the Chinese language, 我是台湾人. They did not say I'm Taiwanese. They say 我是台湾人. So culturally, they still identify with the Chinese culture. They still carry on this civilization that has been there for 5,000 years. They cannot get rid of that. It is in the blood. It is a political identity that's a problem, because Taiwan has achieved so-called democracy. Then they identify themselves as a citizen of this democratic system. That's a problem, because China's political system is still very different. I think to overcome that problem, first, of course, we should make sure this cultural identity will be reinforced. That's why I think the danger of DPP leaders is that they try to take away this cultural identity, because they know political identity is already separated. But for mainland China, of course, to reinforce this cultural identity, and as mainland China become more and more progressed towards modern society, eventually this political identity issue can be overcome. I hope peacefully.
Thank you very much, Professor Huang, for being with us. Thanks a lot. I do
Always
appreciate
my
it.
pleasure.